You may not know his name, but you've probably heard his music.
Let my people go.
Harry T. Burleigh was the grandson of a slave and one of the most influential people in American music. In the first half of the 20th century, he shined as a world-class composer, arranger, and artistic pioneer. But his legacy goes even deeper. The African-American musician played a huge role in bridging the racial divide at the height of Jim Crow America. Burleigh is the subject of the new book, Nobody Knows, the Harry T. Burleigh Story. Our Wendy Griffith recently spoke with author Craig Von Busick about the life of this musical pioneer.
And author Craig Von Busick joins me now to tell us more about Harry T. Burleigh. Craig, thanks for being with us.
Thank you, Wendy. It's a pleasure to be here.
Well, tell us, what are some of the songs that we might recognize from Harry T. Burleigh?
Well, the book is called Nobody Knows, and I worked with Baker Publishing on the title, and I thought it was a great idea because everybody knows the song Nobody Knows. I mean, it's even in The Lion King.
You mean nobody knows?
You sing it wonderfully. Yeah, just like that bird in The Lion King. So everybody knows that song, but nobody knows that Harry T. Burleigh was one of the first people to make it known to the rest of the world. Now, again, nobody knows who wrote that song.
Right.
That emerged out of times when the slaves would come together illegally in the woods, and they would cry out to God for freedom. And spontaneously, the Holy Spirit would work through them and bring forth what Paul calls spiritual songs, psalms, hymns, and spiritual songs. And these songs would emerge, and they meant so much to them that they were passed along orally, which was the African tradition to pass things along orally. Well, it came down, and after the Civil War, a lot of years went by, and they didn't want to remember them because they were so painful. But the next generation, which Burleigh was a part of, they made them known to the world, and more than anybody else, that's what Harry T. Burleigh was known for.
Now, what would be another song that we might, because everybody's heard Nobody Knows, what would be another one that
Were You There When They Crucified My Lord? Swing Low, Sweet Chariot, The Gospel Train, Joshua Fit the Battle of Jericho.
Oh my.
I could go on and on and on.
Now, as a black man in the early 20th century, Burleigh must have faced a lot of obstacles. Can you talk about that?
Yeah, absolutely. In the book, I share a story where he was invited to the hotel, the Ritz-Carlton Hotel, to meet John McCormack, who was the Elvis or this Frank Sinatra of his day. He was an Irish tenor, and Burleigh was not allowed to go to meet him on the regular elevators. He had to go use the freight elevator. This is New York City in the 1920s. We think of it, oh, the South, that's where all the racism was, but he wasn't allowed to go there. So McCormack came down and said, change your policy now or I'm leaving. They wouldn't change the policy, so he left and he never went back to the Ritz-Carlton. That's only one of many stories that we tell about in the book of what he faced at that time.
Craig, Burleigh was obviously a man of faith. Tell us about his relationship with God.
Well, his mother taught from the Hebrew Bible in the Episcopal Church in our hometown of Erie, Pennsylvania. That's how I know about him. And so he grew up in the church. He'd go to the Episcopal Church in the morning, and then in the afternoon, he'd take his grandfather to the mission where they'd sing the spirituals. Then when he got to New York City, he did the same thing all over again. He was involved in the Episcopal Church, but he brought the spirituals to that church. In fact, they used to have a yearly celebratory service of the spirituals that eventually NBC and CBS Radio picked up and posted across the country. But there's one story about his faith that stands out. He used to go before anyone else went to the church, and he would sit there and pray on Sunday mornings. And the pastor would always come in and say, "How are you doing, Mr. Burleigh?" And he would just say, "I'm just getting a feel for the place." And it was just his time to be with God in that wonderful, beautiful sanctuary in New York City. So he loved God, and he brought the Lord's Word to the world through the spirituals.
Well, this is fascinating. Craig Von Busick is author of Nobody Knows, the Harry T. Burleigh Story. You can find it on Amazon and wherever books are sold, also Barnes & Noble. Craig, thanks so much for being with us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Wendy. It's a pleasure.